Welcome to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich, the podcast where I bring you the biggest names from the worlds of media, politics, and law. We dive into unfiltered, unapologetic, and insightful conversations. I speak my mind and I encourage my guests to do the same. No topic is off limits as we dive into the issues that shape our world. My guest today is someone who's become a leading voice in political accountability and media analysis. Ron Filipkowski. Ron is a former federal prosecutor, a Marine Corps veteran, and I love this, a former lifelong Republican who made national headlines when he resigned his position on a judicial nominating commission in protest over the DeSantis administration's attacks on democracy. These days, Ron is perhaps best known for his powerful presence on social media, where he monitors and exposes the far-right ecosystem in real time. Through his incisive posts, videos, and commentary, he's built a massive following of people who rely on him to spotlight the stories and rhetoric that too often fly under the radar. He's the guy journalists and activists turn to when they need to understand what's really happening, and do we ever need to, beneath the surface of political theater. Ron is also editor-in-chief of the Midas Touch Network, Midas Touch Network, a pro-democracy news network that has quickly established itself as one of the most viewed and visited news networks in the world. Today, we're going to talk about everything: the state of our democracy, what's happening in the Republican Party, the influence of extremism in mainstream politics. Ron, it is such a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor for me. My first campaign was 1988 that I worked on. So
And you
I
were working
remember,
for George
I think you were
H.W.
involved in
Bush.
that, right?
Yeah, I was very involved. I lost, you won. What can I say, Ron? You've done amazing things. Tell me what's going on now, Ron. Where do you see things headed?
Well, obviously a lot of what I predicted is happening. I knew it was going to be bad. I didn't think it was going to be this bad this fast. I thought he would kind of ease his way into it a little more, but obviously they're throwing everything out there at once. So right now, I mean, we're looking to our Democratic leaders who have kind of were caught, I think, with their pants down a little bit,
Yep.
uh, a little off guard, didn't quite know how to respond to things. So we had to look to the courts, and really the courts have been our bulwark for a little while, at the trial court level, but now the Supreme Court is starting to step in, and I'm not so sure we're going to be able to count on the courts much longer. So we're taking to the streets, right, as we did last Saturday with some incredible protests.
Ron, how did you become who you are? You started out with George H.W. Bush. You were a Republican. You were a prominent Republican, a DeSantis appointee. What happened? Tell us your story.
Well, Donald Trump happened. I mean, although, it wasn't just Trump. I never voted for Trump. I actually supported Marco Rubio in the 2016 primary. And
Hmm.
then when Trump got the nomination, I just said, no, I'm not doing it. So I voted none of the above in that election. And then, but I was still involved in the Republican Party. I was local club president and all of that. But just watching, I say Trump was the beginning of what began my exodus, but it wasn't really him. It was all the other Republicans. A lot of the people that I knew and respected for many years, who I watched sort of give in, who I knew didn't like Trump. And I watched them put their self-interest, their ambition ahead of what they knew was the right thing to do. And I just couldn't be one of those people. And so really just watching what happened to the party at the grassroots level is what disgusted me even more than anything Trump was doing. And then, so I sort of checked out of everything, stopped going to the meetings, but really what caused me to get involved more as an activist and to oppose Trump openly and resign my position was the COVID briefings, that Trump was giving in 2020, which that was the first time I really plugged back in and paid attention to what he was doing closely. And I was just absolutely horrified, mortified by those briefings. And I just said, you know what, I've got to do something more than what I'm doing. And I saw a commercial for the Lincoln Project and for Bill Kristol's group, their And I said, and they were soliciting Republicans who wanted to oppose Trump and support Biden. So I contacted them and said, what can I do? And that's sort of how it started.
And what do you do now? I mean, how do you protest this sort of thing? It just makes me feel powerless, I have to tell you. It leaves me feeling very depressed and powerless. And I give you enormous credit for being out there and fighting. How do you fight it?
Yeah, it can be exhausting sometimes. But to be honest with you, it was harder for me playing defense when, when the Biden administration was in office and having to defend a lot of, not only attack MAGA and Trump and the Republicans, which is what I do best, but having to at the same time defend a lot of the things that the Biden administration was doing that I felt was really going to hurt us in the 2024 election. And that was more difficult for me than, watching a Charlie Kirk podcast. Because really how I got into this was I felt like I understood the MAGA movement really well at like the cellular level. I knew who the people were. I understood the way they thought, and I felt like the media, mainstream media, did not have any understanding.
Didn't
It
get
was
it
like
at
they were
all.
looking at them as like they were fish in a fishbowl, and I felt like I'm surrounded by MAGA. Like my kids are Trump supporters. Like I just felt like I really understood who they were, how they thought, and how they tick. And so I dove into the whole world of the activists and the podcasters. I started going to the rallies and the events, just blending in, keeping my mouth shut, talking to people, and really figuring out what was happening at that level. And then I just started surfacing stuff on social media that I saw and that I came across. So I thought my niche ended up being sort of how to explain what is happening in MAGA and Trump world to a progressive Democratic audience. And that's, I think, really what very few other people have done, is to be
Yep.
able to make that connection between my audience is all liberal Democrats who don't want to hear from these people. They don't want to hear from Steve Bannon or Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, where I can sort of take what they're doing and what they're saying and make it and package it in a way that I think Democrats can handle handle it in
But
small
help me do
doses.
that, Ron. How do I understand? I mean, I find it, my son is sort of leans MAGA, and I find it very hard to understand what he's so angry about. It's out of anger and out of a sense of resentment, this white male anger. How do you explain that to a progressive like me?
That's a good question. I mean, I try to use a lot of humor. I really do. And that's probably the most consistent feedback I get from people, because I read thousands of comments every single day that people make to my posts that are almost all Democrats. And a lot of what they tell me is the fact that I am able to inject humor, make it funny, keep it short and to the point. Like if I'm going to share a clip of Trump, like the before people who used to do MAGA clips, there wasn't many before I really got into it, but the people who did, they were just too long. They'd post these like 3-4 minute clips of Donald Trump on social media, and it's like nobody wants to listen to him for that long. So I kind of adopted this like 30-second rule where like I tried to make every video clip I posted no longer than 30 seconds, because I figured out that that's about as much as most Democrats can take before they're ready to pull their hair out. So I think that helped me too, like presenting things in a humorous way, but also a very like quick hitting way. Like, I'm not asking you to, when you read my columns, I'm not asking you to read like these long form paragraph columns like the Financial Times or the Washington Post. You're reading like very quick blurbs, pithy things that are all strung together, that make sense, that tell a story in a funny way.
Tell me the story of an angry white man in a funny way.
I think you just make fun of their absurdity. And that's really kind of what I do is you really show how what underpins their thinking is so much hypocrisy and so much racism, which I, when I really saw it when Barack Obama ran the first time at the grassroots level.
Mhm.
And I didn't, and I guess in looking back on my days as a Republican now and involved in so many campaigns, I ask myself all the time, was it always there? That anger, that resentment, the hate, the misogyny, was it always there, or did Trump create it, or was it there and he just brought it to the surface? And I'm inclined to think it was the second thing. That people I thought I knew became different people and it wasn't from Trump, it was from Barack Obama running. And I looked at the venom and the hatred that they had for him, and I was mystified. And I said, look, here we have this man who, like, you could disagree with his tax policy or his healthcare policy, but this is a man who was, married, is a good father, loves his wife, has a career, no scandal, spotlessly clean. He's a Christian, and compare him side by side to somebody like Donald Trump. And I'm like, this is a man who's lived his life, Obama, in every way that we as conservatives say that somebody should live their life. And Donald Trump has done the exact opposite. And yet you all love Trump and you viscerally hate Barack Obama. And, the only answer to that, to me, I concluded, was race. Like, they hated him unlike they hated any other Democrat. And so who got the nomination? They hated Jesse Jackson too, but they never took him seriously.
Right.
So that seeing that reaction to Obama really upset me and really, like, revealed a lot of who these people really are behind the facade. So I make fun of, like, their Christian hypocrisy a lot of the times, a lot of the pastors and stuff, how they say one thing in church and then they do another thing in their private life. And that's really what I try to do, is just show when Charlie Kirk talks about women need to get married young and have more kids they can afford and not go to college. And, I highlight that. I bring that out and show people these are the thought leaders of the Republican Party. So what I did is a lot of the stuff that they say to each other behind the scenes in these conferences and private rooms, I brought it out into the open, into the public sphere, and let all of America see this is who these people really are.
And why don't they reject him? I look at what Steve Bannon has to say, what a Charlie Kirk has to say, and it's outrageous. And yet they are surrounding the president. They are influential. You've got Gavin Newsom going out and interviewing them on their podcasts and giving them legitimacy. What's going on?
I'm still upset. We've had a lot of internal fights in Midas, which is the company I work for. There's about 10 of us, and I was furious at Newsom for doing that. And there were people who disagree with me that I work with about that, and they try to explain why he did what he did. But I think I came at it from a different angle. And he has followed me on social media, Newsom, for a long time, and I've made my feelings known, so I'm sure he saw it. But if I could explain it to him, I'm like, look, I listened to Steve Bannon thousands of hours. I have listened to Charlie Kirk thousands of hours on podcasts, at conferences. I can play for him the 10 worst things that these people have said, and he would just be mortified and horrified. But I felt like he's a little bit naive as far as, like, who these people really are, I think. And also maybe he just seems more interested in building a podcast audience than running for president. It seems like he's just completely taking the Democratic primary for granted here, and he's already moved on to the general election in 2025.
Yeah, it does seem that way, and not for any good reason. Do you see him as the future leader of the Democratic Party?
I thought so. I really thought so until 3 weeks ago, because it wasn't just that he did it. It was like he didn't even he doubled down on it in interviews after, when he's asked about it. He continued to criticize Democrats and suggest that people who are upset about what he did are closed-minded. They aren't willing to listen to the other side. It's like, I'll listen to more Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon than he will in his whole lifetime. I know who these people are. It's not like I'm afraid to hear opposing viewpoints. But so to me, when he said, like, the people who are upset that I had them on are people who don't want to hear from the other side, that upset me even more. So,
I
it was
understand
just like,
why.
I don't understand what he's doing. He platformed them. He legitimized, to me, these are far right, crazy, kooky people who have said a lot of crazy, kooky stuff. I mean, just a few months ago, Charlie Kirk did his Martin Luther King Day show podcast on why we should do away with the Martin Luther King holiday and how Martin Luther King was a terrible American. I mean, this is who Gavin Newsom just hosted on his first podcast. I don't understand it.
Tell me about Midas.
So Midas is a group of guys, the three brothers, that started it. And what they wanted to do is, see, I did like a missive a couple years ago where I said, man, I really think I know how to take on MAGA. And the plan that I have to do it is different than what anybody else is doing. And political consultants, I brought it to first, and I thought, let me put together a team of 5 or 6 people, and we'll quit our jobs, because I was a practicing lawyer for 29 years. We'll walk away from our careers, and I know who to hire, some of the most ruthless researchers and social media influencer researchers in the business. And let's put this team together and let's go after them. Not Trump, but the people underneath Trump who support Trump, all the Project 2025 type people, all the influencers, all the people who run their conferences and their rallies. Let's go after them and take them out and expose them, because nobody's doing that. But the consultants, they weren't interested because it doesn't fit their business model. They make commercials, they make ads, and they make money off those ads. So what I was talking about really wasn't going to make them money. It was going to cost them money. So I got frustrated and I put it out on social media. And then Ben, who was also a full-time practicing lawyer from LA, the oldest brother, contacted me a few months later. He said, ever since I read your thread about what you want to do, I've been thinking about it, and I want to start a media company. I'm thinking maybe we could take your idea and create a media company and sort of try to make it profitable and go up on multiple platforms. You tell me some of the people you want to hire. I have a few people I want to bring in, and we'll put together this team of really ruthless attack dogs to go after Republicans and go after Trump and go after MAGA. So that's what we did. We did it 2 years ago, eight of us. And I think we've been doing a pretty good job at it.
Tell us how to find you online. Where do we find you?
Well, on Substack is where I do my daily column. I write a daily column called Today in Politics. And I think it's different than any other column out there. I'm not aware. I read everything that's out there. I'm not aware of anything else in media like what I do. It's a pretty lengthy column. I do it every single day. I work on it 14 hours a day from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. And it's just packed of little blurbs and quotes and snippets of everything that happened that day across the spectrum, from the left, the right, from Europe, Asia. It's just everything that impacts the United States, foreign policy, domestic. It's just everything that I can pack into one column in a quick, easy to read, pithy way. That's what I put in there. So that's the best way to find me, is that's where my daily column is. But I'm also on Twitter and Blue Sky as well.
And what else is your media company doing?
So we just passed Joe Rogan on the YouTube charts as far as the most downloaded podcast. Yes, we did.
That's wonderful. Mazel tov.
Yeah, we just took over the #1 spot as the most downloaded podcast in America. We've been at 2 consecutive months now. Keep in mind, we started this 2 years ago.
That's amazing.
So we have millions and millions of followers. And so, yeah, we have the podcast network, which we have We have probably about 20 people that do podcasts on our network. I'm one of them, and mine is called Uncovered, where I uncover what's going on with MAGA behind the scenes. I do that once a week. Then we have our website, MidasTouch.com, and then we have Midas News, which is on Substack. And then we all have our individual social media pages, where we have millions and millions of followers. So really what I think we are is we're sort of a hybrid between grassroots organizers of the Democratic Party and media and alternative media. And like take the rallies, for example, from last Saturday. We really tried to play a role in getting people to go out there. And then I had everybody send me pictures of their favorite signs from the protest rally. And I got 5,000 pictures. And I picked the top 15 and put it out. And it got like, I think in 2 days, it got like 8 million views. So that's what we do.
But there's Donald Trump, Ron, and he's out there golfing. You've got millions of people on the street, and he's playing golf and telling us everything is just fine. And the silence from Republican leaders is just deafening. Where is the Republican leadership in this country now? Where are the George Bushes and the Ronald Reagans and the normal Republicans?
I think for a long time, that was the most frustrating thing for former Republicans like me or anti-Trump Republicans, was the fact that people we know despise, like Marco Rubio. I mean, I know Marco Rubio. I know he hates Donald Trump. I know for a fact he does. But they all surrendered. They all figured out how to play the game. Because look, here's the bottom line: if Marco Rubio didn't play the game, Trump would have endorsed somebody to run against him in his last primary, and he probably wouldn't even be in the Senate right now. So these guys are all making their bargains. The interesting thing now is the ones who are left, because so many of the people who openly oppose Trump are now gone, like your Liz Cheneys and your Kinsingers. So there's not many left. There are some. But the neat trick that they're all doing now, and you can pay attention to this and watch it closely, is when they criticize Trump, and they do daily. There's Ron Paul was ripping Trump today on tariffs. There's Republicans out there that criticize Trump's policies every single day, and I read their quotes all day long, but they will never say his name. And that's the bargain here that I think that Trump has made with a lot of them. I'm talking about most of them are in swing districts and swing states. Is they will criticize what he's doing for their voters back home, so they could say, well, I criticize that policy, as long as they never say his name. They can't. So like Don Bacon can go on and say, I completely disagree with what we're doing with Ukraine and how Zelensky was treated, but he won't say Donald Trump or JD Vance's name while doing that. And as long as they don't say his name, Trump seems to leave him alone. So that seems to be the new deal that they're all making, these spineless people.
They're spineless. What are Republicans going to do about it? I mean, are they so afraid of Elon Musk and being primaried out that nobody will stand on principle? I mean, it's disconcerting.
Yeah, I mean, because primary voters are generally your most rabid, hardcore voters. And in the Republican Party, a lot of primary turnouts are 22, 25%. So that's your hardcore of the hardcore. So it's not necessarily a reflection of the Republican electorate as a whole. It's your most hardcore. And Trump controls that percentage. Those primary voters, Trump has a firm hold on them. So it's very rare, that somebody that Trump endorses will run against a Republican in a primary and have that Republican beat that person. It has happened a few times, but not often. Look at what happened with Liz Cheney. She got completely annihilated in a state that she could have been there for the rest of her life representing Wyoming, but she stepped out of line and she lost by 40 points, I think 38 points. It wasn't even close. So this is what they all fear. They all saw what happened to her, and they don't want to be the next Liz Cheney. So they've just decided staying in Congress is more important than their conscience.
Isn't that depressing?
Yeah. It really is. I oftentimes think about John McCain, and I often think, like, if he was younger, if he was alive today, would he be that person that maybe would have stood up to Trump and rallied people, where a lot of the moderate Republicans could have rallied around. I don't know if he would have done it, but he seemed like maybe the only person who could have sort of rallied a Republican opposition to Trump from within the party, who had sort of the maybe the character to be willing to stand up to him, and who probably could have continued to win his elections in Arizona regardless of whether he had Trump support or not. But is there somebody like that out there now? I mean, we
Yeah,
had
is there?
Romney, you know.
Romney's gone.
Yeah, I mean, man, Romney's gone. Romney probably would have lost a primary had he tried to run again. I think, good possibility in Utah. Plus he's 82 or something. So yeah, who is out there inside the Republican Party that would stand up
Yeah.
to Trump is a really good question, and it could do it from a conservative
Hmm.
place. Ron DeSantis, but he's probably worse. I mean, he's
Probably
probably the
worse.
only one out there who's shown. I mean, Nikki Haley, she has no support. She has no
No
support
support.
inside the party. A lot of the people who voted for her were crossovers in open primaries. She didn't do very well in closed primary states. So I don't know. I don't really know who it is. It looks like the successor to Trump is going to be JD Vance at this point, and
Which is terrifying. I mean,
you know.
J.D. Vance is even scarier than Trump to
Uh,
me.
yeah, I think so because the key thing about Trump is he's undisciplined and unfocused, and he's all over the place. So that's his weakness. But people like DeSantis and Vance, they don't have that weakness. They're very focused, and so that makes them in many ways a lot more dangerous. But I do think creating a rift between Musk and Trump is priority number one right now. Certainly for us is every chance we get to try and create wedges and start fights between these people, we take advantage of that. Because since we monitor what they're saying, we oftentimes will find somebody talking shit about one Republican talking shit about another, and we make sure that person sees it. For example, I speak with Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend from time to time. I mean, we've communicated for years, right? And that's been a useful relationship to me, because when something happens within the Republican Party that I know she won't like, I make sure she sees it through him. And so I've oftentimes given things to him that she has then rage posted about an hour later. So, those kind of
What's he
things are
like?
what we also do.
What's he like, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend? I've always imagined that he must be a piece of work.
Yeah, he's very, very far right. In fact, I tried to suggest to I forget what publication it was who did a profile on him, and I tried to suggest that I thought he was a little more normal than her, and she radicalized him. And then he texted me and said, "No, no, I'm basically as crazy as she is." So, no, he got a White House Correspondents' press pass
I
as a
saw that for
result
the
of
Zelensky
he
meeting.
works for Real America's Voice, which is the same network that Bannon is on, far right, podcast network. And he ended up getting from Trump. So he is now in the White House as part of the White House Correspondents. And Trump usually always, and he's part of the Oval Office press corps, which is really hard to get into the Oval Office right now with Trump. He is one of the reporters who gets to go in there, and
Consent.
Trump usually he calls on him first for the first question. That's
That's
Marge
insane.
Greene's boyfriend. Yeah.
And why does the press, what is your view of the mainstream media these days, Ron?
It's just horrifying. It's so bad. It's so terrible. Just because I watch things happen like generically. I watch CPAC or I watch a Trump rally, and then like I report on what we just saw. We report on it, Midas does. And then I'll watch like CBS, ABC, or CNN, and I'm just like, they report on it completely different. And I'm like, did they watch what I just watched? I wonder sometimes how they build their narratives and what they look for, and why they won't just tell the truth. Why, you know, I say Trump lied about this. They're afraid to use the word lie. It's almost like they're so afraid of being sued or something, or making somebody upset. So yeah, I honestly stopped watching TV, like on a TV set, a couple years ago. I think it was after the final straw for me was after somebody came on, one of the Trump surrogates came on like 2 years ago, and he had just released this bonkers video about his education policy where he wanted like parents of every public school to elect the school principal every year. He put out a video that said that, and I was just like shocked. So I put the video out, and it went, he said it at some speech, and I was like, this is just absolutely nuts. I put it out. It went really viral on social media. And then a Trump campaign surrogate was on the next day. And I tuned in thinking, okay, now somebody's going to ask him about this thing that just went viral about this crazy education policy that would affect 100 million people. And they asked him who he's going to pick for a running mate for the 5,000th time. So
Mhm.
it just got, watching the campaign coverage, there's such a the other thing is Trump rallies, take for example, like we saw so many times how all these things were staged with paid people. We knew who they were. We recognized the people. He would go to like the Harlem Bodega, for example, where he went there,
Mhm.
and every person who was there was a member of the New York Young Republican Club. There was not one person at the Harlem Bodega from Harlem. We used facial recognition to identify every one of them, and yet mainstream media just reported it like people in Harlem came out to greet Trump. I'm like, do you guys do any due diligence here? I mean, we're
No.
just like 8 guys with a website, and we figured it out in 2 seconds.
What are they afraid of, Ron?
I mean, right now they're afraid of being sued. I mean, I guess, or they're afraid of Trump going, look at Joe and Mika. I mean, that was inexplicable to me that they would go down to
Yeah,
Mar-a-Lago
why
and
did they
kiss the
go? They
ring.
went and sucked up.
I mean, I'm
What is
just
Bill Maher
horrified
doing at
by
the
that.
White House?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I can't, that's the part that I, have a hard time accepting. And so when you see things like that, and you see them settling lawsuits like the Stephanopoulos lawsuit and
Yep,
others.
awful.
We've got the Rachel Maddow lawsuit. I forget who brought that one, but there's multiple lawsuits right now still pending, that have been filed by Trump against different media companies for different things, all frivolous. And it just seems like they would rather just get along. I think a lot of it is access to, you know, um, but they would rather just get along with the Trump administration. But yeah, it's the access. They want the interviews. They want to get called on. They want to be in the Oval Office. They want to be on Air Force One. And so I think that they understand that if they step out of line, they're going to lose all of that with Trump.
How optimistic are you? You do this every single day. You contribute, you work your butt off, you expose their lies, and yet he continues to have power. And as you say, we've got to depend on the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court can't do anything about the economy, for starters, which is going to hurt a lot of these MAGA people. You would think they would care about that. How optimistic are you about the future?
I can tell you, I would be so much more optimistic with new Democratic leadership. This is my feeling. I think there's so much talent in the Democratic Party, and it's mostly the younger people and the
Yeah.
middle-aged people, and it's mostly the governors. I mean, if you look around, we have so many great governors. When we talk about Newsom, but Andy Beshear in Kentucky, who
Yep.
won a R+30 state by 10 points twice, against, as a Democrat, Whitmer in Michigan, Shapiro in Pennsylvania. We could go around. There's so many, I think, rock star governors at the Democratic governors, and the younger members of Congress. We have so many great ones, but the problem that we have is, we have the leadership, which is, I don't want to be ageist, but very geriatric, who
Mhm.
frankly are stuck in the 90s. Look, I came up then in the 80s and 90s too. And so, but I've been able to sort of move on and adjust to the reality of politics in the social media era and politics in the Fox News and era and the right-wing alternative media ecosystem era, which didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, but is now very powerful. And I feel like people like Chuck Schumer and others, Dick Durbin, we could go on, simply absolutely don't understand what is happening. They don't understand MAGA, and they recite these same tired slogans and platitudes that they were saying in 1996. And I'm just like, look.
They were saying it in 1986 too.
I'm just like, look, if you can't keep up with what's happening in technology and social media, 90% of the Democrats in Congress don't even do their own social media pages. They have a staffer, put out talking points. It's like, if you can't engage in the current system, you need to get off the stage, because there are plenty of talented Democrats who want those leadership positions and who do understand how to play the game that way. And it's not just an age thing, because I'll tell you one person who's great at it, who's in his 80s, and that's Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders is one of the most popular politicians in America right now. How do you square that with the strength of MAGA?
Well, I think what I've been preaching for a long time, I think the Democratic Party is finally starting to understand it, which is the Republicans created their own alternate media ecosystem. Their podcast world, their conferences like the CPACs, like Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, they created all this stuff largely out of necessity, because after January 6th, most of them were kicked off social media. They were banned. And so they created their own platforms and most of them couldn't get on legitimate media or couldn't get jobs with mainstream media. So they created their own media platforms, and they thrived, and they got big, and they got powerful, and they reached grassroots people, and they mobilized people, and they raised money. And I looked at the Democratic side and I saw nothing. There was nothing there. They're virtually non-existent. And so I said, this is going to come back to bite us at some point. You can't, the too many Democrats rely on like CNN or MSNBC fact checkers to get their messaging out and to counteract MAGA. You're counting on the wrong people. Corporate media is not going to come save you. So I was an advocate for a long time of creating our own alternate ecosystem, which is what was the impetus for Midas when we started it 2 years ago. Now I think for the first time, the higher ups in the party are starting to realize that this is what we need to do. This is really what has propped up Trump. It really was that right-wing media, alternate media ecosystem that could mobilize tens of millions of people in 24 hours. That's what he has the ability to do, but not by himself. He does it using them. A Democrat has nobody to go to make that happen. They think, well, I'll go on CNN or I'll call a press conference in front of Capitol Hill. And I'm like, what are we doing here? That's like 20 years ago. You can't wait the next day and then put out a statement. Like, that's not the way the world works anymore. It's too late at that point. By that time, the right-wing disinformation machine has already been cranking for 24 hours. You're too late to the party. It's already over. You've already lost the information war. So I think that's what's happening. And what's been great is that I sort of shamed members of Congress, because I'm like, how many of you Democrats in Congress, because many of them follow me on social media, senators and congressmen. So I said, how many of you have been on a podcast in the last 30 days? How many Democratic podcasts? I'm not talking about big ones. I'm talking about medium-sized, little ones. How are you helping build you say you want an alternate ecosystem? It's up to you to help build it by getting out there and doing interviews with these podcasters that only have maybe a couple thousand views. Help build them. Trump did that. I watched Trump go on podcasts in 2021 and 2022 that had almost no viewers, that had almost no followers. Oh, I watched him do 100 podcasts because he understood. He doesn't understand many things, but he understood that, which is, I need to build these people up to help create these platforms because they're going to work for me in 2024. And I think Democrats are now finally getting it because they're starting to come on our podcast. But the other problem I see, and I don't mean to go on forever, but
No,
a
go
lot of
on.
them are like Newsom. They're starting their own podcast. It's like, do you want to be a podcaster or do you want to be a senator? Like, go on other people's
Yeah.
podcasts, you know? So,
Are they doing it? Who's doing it? Who should I watch? Who do you watch?
I mean, Chris Murphy right now is everywhere.
Right.
AOC is always great. Bernie's good. Let's see. I mean, Ro Khan is everywhere, but I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but he's everywhere.
Hmm.
There's I think Seth Mouton is in a lot of different places. Jasmine Crockett is great. Um, who else? Jared Moskowitz is in a lot of different places. I like Jamie Raskin a lot.
I love
Um,
Jamie Raskin. He was my student.
oh yeah, so
Yeah,
you
at
should then
Harvard.
you should. I mean, Jamie Raskin, I think, should be on the Supreme Court. That's just my thinking, but
He's wonderful. He's had a lot of tragedy in his life, and he's just a wonderful person. But I don't understand why the Democratic Party is not fighting hard. When I saw that the DNC's first lawsuit that they brought against Trump was about the FEC and independence, I thought, where are these people coming from? Why aren't they fighting? Where is the Democratic National Committee? Where is the money coming from? We just don't have it together, it seems like.
you think about how much money was raised last cycle,
Yep.
and what Harris spent $2 billion in like 3 months. And it's like, what do we have left at the end of the day? The problem is we're spending all our money on like TV ads. So
TV
we
ads.
ran like 9 million abortion ads, in 2020. And I'm just like, it's good. You need to make that point, but you reach a saturation point. You know this better than I do. Of these ads where it's like after somebody's seen their fifth in Pennsylvania, after they've seen their 50th pro-choice ad, why are we continuing to spend money on this when you could spend 1% of that money and build a permanent infrastructure, alternative infrastructure. So instead of just constantly burning money on these 30-second TV ads, which again, we're going back to, this is very 1980s,
I was going to say this
it's
is 1980s campaign style.
people don't watch
Not
TV
today.
anymore, especially young
No.
people. This is why Republicans are doing better with young people, especially young men. I would tell Gavin Newsom, you don't need to sit down with Charlie Kirk to understand why young men are going to the Republican Party. I can tell you, we're not reaching. Number one, it's some of the messaging stuff, but number two, we're not reaching them where they are. They're not watching CNN. Men under 35 aren't watching MSNBC. So we're tailoring our approach and our messaging towards, and we're simply not reaching people, and they are.
Ron, you are a national treasure, and I want to just thank you for everything you've been doing and hope you'll come back and give us some more insight in the future because you
I
really
can I ask you one question though
sure.
before we stop? Because when the Lake and Riley thing happened, because I saw this coming, I knew they were going to use migrant crime in this campaign, and it made me think
Willie
of Willie
Horton all
Horton.
over again.
It made me think of Willie Horton. I
Yep.
saw it like so clear as day, like a year out. They're going
So
to
did I.
Willie Horton, Joe Biden, and end up being Harry, and they're going to do it with a migrant. And
Yep.
I just thought, was that your reaction to you?
Yep. Exactly my reaction. Exactly my reaction. And we fell for it again. We
It
didn't
was a
answer
saint.
it.
It
We
was
didn't fight it.
1988 all
We
over
didn't
again,
do
wasn't
it.
it?
It was 88 all over again. And so was that ad they did at the end where they said, him, her, their, them, she's on their side, we're on your side. That was a Willie Horton ad. And it worked.
I
And
remember your
it
quote
was
from back then.
symbolic and it worked.
I think it was you who said they made Willie Horton Mike Dukakis's running mate.
They did. Well, that's what Lee Atwater said he was going to do when he did it. And it worked.
And they did it
Got to
again.
call him out on it. And we didn't call him out on it back in 88. And we're still not calling him out on it effectively. I mean, they've turned this immigrant issue into such racism that it just eats me to my core. And they've terrified people and they've defied the rule of law. And they're getting away with it.
Well, you were the OG on that. You were
I was the
you
OG. I'm still the OG on that. Ron, thank you so much for joining me today. You are a national treasure, and just keep at it and keep writing, and I'll keep following you, and we'll do the best we can.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I appreciate it.
Okay. You've been listening to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich. I want to take this moment to thank Ron again for a great conversation. Excuse me. I want to take this moment to thank Ron again for a great conversation and to encourage you to go to his Substack. What's the name of your Substack? Just your name.
It's Midas Touch.
Midas Touch. Okay. So we're going to go to that every day. And if you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch every episode on our YouTube channel. Please leave a rating and review on your chosen platform. It really helps us reach more listeners and keep the conversation going. Follow us on X at No Holding Back FM. And for my weekly column, visit www.creators.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on No Holding Back.